In this video, I'm going to take you step by step through modeling a simple 3D model. The model we're going to do today is going to be a pincushion. If you've ever done any kind of sewing or had someone in your house who's done sewing, you've probably seen this quintessential pincushion that everybody seems to have of the tomato and the strawberry. We're not going to do the strawberry, we're just going to do the tomato, because I thought this would be a really cute kind of quick 3D model. We're going to make it a little bit cartoony, so we are going to kind of push some of the aesthetics of it so that it looks a little bit more cushionier. So let's start with getting a shape that's close to our tomato, which is going to be probably our sphere. So let's start with the sphere. And let's go to the attribute editor and change the size of it. So the radius 1 centimeter, that's not really going to work for us. I would say probably closer to 3 centimeters would be accurate. And I'm probably going to also change the subdivision axes. Let me look at it from the top real quick before I decide. So yes, I'm going to change them. Let's see, 1, 2. I'm trying to think ahead of something I'm going to show you. So what does 24 look like? 24 should work for us. Do I want to do 24? Yeah, we'll do 24. I think that'll be a nice, it'll end up with a nice shape at the end. As far as the subdivision height, I think we can stick with 20. If in fact we could probably go a little bit lower. We don't really need that many. Let's do an even 16 for that, and that should be fine. So I do want to make sure that I am moving my pivot point to the bottom center of this. So I'm going to get my move tool and I'm going to hit edit pivot, and then hold V so I can snap it to the bottom, because since I'm working with the sphere, I have a nice vertice at the bottom center to snap to. Then I'm going to reset this back so it's sitting at the origin. I'm going to rename this to tomato, and then I'm going to freeze its transform and delete its history. And now we are ready to model. First things first, it's not close to that tomato shape. The tomato shape is a little bit squatty. So I'm going to go get my scale tool. And it's really nice that I move this to the origin too, because watch this. Now I'm going to scale down on here, and it's, you know, a little bit easier to tell what shape I'm getting. So I'm just going to kind of squat it just a little bit to make it more of that tomatoey shape. Since I did use my scale tool and I don't plan to ever scale it back, I should go ahead and freeze that transform. I don't want to accidentally keep that information. It can make stuff kind of weird later on, so we want to make sure that that gets frozen so we're not accidentally keeping any scaling information in our model. Next, I want to kind of make like these ridges in here on the model. These are created on the actual object itself. If we were making one like a pincushion, by putting strings around and kind of cinching them down so that we get that cushiony sort of look to it. That, you know, it's called a pincushion because it's supposed to look like, you know, kind of like a cushion. So the easiest way to do this is going to be with selecting around and then using our scale tool. So watch this. I did it on 24 for a reason. I'm going to get my select tool. So I'm going to first grab this edge by double clicking it, the one that's right here. I'm going to skip 2, hold shift, double click, 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 skip 2, hold shift, double click again, and we can see that we're all the way back around. So we selected it evenly. That's why it's nice to know how many of those subdivisions you're working with so that if we do need to do something clean like this, we do have nice numbers. I'm then going to get my scale tool. So rather than scaling it like this, like we do a lot, we could. It's not quite the look I want though. I kind of want it a little bit puckered at the top too. So I'm actually going to scale it in all directions. I'm going to go very slow though. And we see that we are starting to get kind of that cushiony sort of look. So it looks like there might be a string, you know, in the middle there. If we're not too satisfied with this shape, like it needs to be a little, you know, a little bit more, we could always kind of come in here and mess with some of these other ones. But I think for the sake of time, I think that's close enough to what we'd want with that cushion sort of look. This particular one, I don't really like the puckered top like this. This kind of looks kind of strange. So I'm going to hide it with another shape because we usually, if we look at these tomatoes, have kind of like that star shape. So let's, it's supposed to be like the top of a tomato leaf. So I'm going to actually create this with a cylinder now. So let me move this up. Actually, let me put it at the origin. Move it up so I can see it. And I want to be very mindful of information here. So these cushions, let's see, they look like it's basically like a star pour little bumpy out. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The way I'm going to make this, I need 8 kind of leaves, but I'm also going to need them a part that goes in. So I'm going to have to make a cylinder that has subdivision axes of 16. And this is way too tall. The height's going to be closer to like a 0.5. Ooh, even smaller than that. Well, I guess I can leave this for now. I can always adjust the height later. No, 0.2. There we go. You see that? Okay. So the leaf part usually goes over the fatter part. So I'm going to go around, first, freeze, transform, delete history. I don't need to do any other kind of, I'm not going to move the pivot point on this. I don't really need to do that. What I do need to do though is select my correct edges. So I'm going to select this edge. Oh, I should move to my select tool. This edge, this edge, this edge, this edge, every other one. Then I can get my scale tool and scale them out to make that shape. Something else I can do while I have those selected is do my move tool. And notice these aren't extruding. I'm not extruding. I'm just scaling and moving. I can move them down now, and I get like that top kind of shape. Notice it is getting a little bit ugly. Like it's kind of mad about the shape we're making. Do you see that? You see? This means before we do that, we might want to add a little more definition to this. So I'm going to select all these edges. I'm doing the bottom edge too. I'm going to do a connect. I'm going to up those segments to 2. And I know it's kind of hard to see because it's a little bit wibbly, but that's fine. This is closer to what I want. I want them kind of nice and even in the middle. And then I'm going to go through and select these again, move them down. I can then double click that edge and kind of adjust these a little bit. And we have our tomato top. It's a little bit edgy. You know what? I think I changed my mind. I don't want those bottom faces. So we're never going to see them. So how would we get rid of them? I'm going to hide my tomato. I just select it and hit H to hide it. So I can rotate under. I'm going to get my face select. I'm going to turn camera. No, I'll show you something else. I'm going to first come in. I'm going to hit Q for select. I'm going to just very carefully select this first ridge, this first little ring. Actually, no. Let me do it the smarter way. We can ring select. So I'm going to select this first one. Double click. Selects our ring. Very handy shortcut key. And you could find these underneath here too, is our grow and our shrink. If we grow our select, it will expand our selection out by 1. If we shrink, it'll shrink it down by 1. The shortcut keys, if you hold shift, it is the greater than less than sign. So I use these a lot to help me with selection so that I can, if I select one thing, I can expand that selection out. So we got that. I'm going to delete those and turn my tomato back on by just selecting it under the outliner and hitting H. I don't really like this look, so I'm going to go ahead and select. Oops, let's make sure I just have this one selected. I'm just going to select these vertices on the edge here. Get that scale tool again. Scale them out this way, and then get my move and push them in a little bit further. There we go. It's a little bit hard, that edge. I should probably come in, select that edge, and soften it. And we have our tomato top. Not too bad. I might come in and add some more edge loops too. This one's a little bit hard. I could always select it and do a bevel. Not quite so strong. That might give me a little bit better of a look. But for the sake of time, I don't want to spend too much more time working on that top. This is close enough for what we need. Let me save it real quick. Next, before I go any further, I do want to combine these together because they're done, and I don't want to forget that. So I'm going to select the tomato, select that top piece I just made. I'm then going to hold Shift when I choose the combine, because I want to double check that it's going to make that final pivot position is going to be at the world origin. I'm going to click close. Oops, I'm sorry. Click apply, not close. Oh no, it messed up, kind of weird. Let's undo that. I must have something strange going on with this one. Let me make sure before I combine those, I freeze those transforms and clear the history out. That was not an expected thing, so let's try that again. What is going on? Hold on. I found my problem. At some point, I accidentally hit 2 on the keyboard to show the smooth version of the tomato. This is what it should be looking like. Sorry about that. If you ever encounter that, it was just auto smoothing it, which we don't want to do. You don't really see much of a difference now, but if I select them, tomato, cylinder, combine them, we don't get that weirdness. So last thing before we go any further, let's make sure we clean up this merge. So I'm going to select all these things and do a delete history. And then we have our fully put together tomato. Next, let's add a couple pins. So I'm going to model a pin, one pin for us to stick into there. And I'm going to do this very simply, actually, with a cylinder. So I'm going to create another cylinder. It's way not quite the right shape. Let's fix some of the attributes. The radius is going to be really small, like a 0.05 to start with. And we are doing it a little bit cartoony, so it might be a little bit thicker than an actual pin. Height, let's set it at 3 centimeters. And the subdivision axes can go down pretty far. I'm going to drop them down to 4. The reason I started with this cylinder is because I wasn't quite sure if I wanted to do 4. We could do 3. Since this is pretty small, we could probably get away with 3. Oops, stop. Let's try actually 6. Let's do 6. I think 6 will ultimately look better. Oof, this tomato's bothering me. Let me fix something real quick. I noticed this. I need to harden and soften some of these edges. They're a little bit edgy. It's going to distract me while I'm trying to make this pin. That's better. All right, back to the pin. Sorry. Cylinder radius 0.05. Height. I'm going to drop back down to 3. And then subdivision axis of 6. So we don't actually need to see the pin. Like it's going to be stuck in. But before we delete the bottom, let's move our pivot to the bottom, because we can just snap it right to that vertex. It's going to be really helpful with placing these later. And then once we're done, we're going to freeze our transform and delete our history, but I do want to delete out all these faces. I'm then going to double click this edge and use my scale tool to kind of scale it to make it more pointy, more pin-like. And then last, I do want to make a bit of a pin head. So I'm going to just grab these faces on the top. I'm going to go to my move tool, hold shift, and extrude it up a little bit. Change to my scale tool, pop it out. Back to move, hold shift, move it up a little bit. Hold shift, move it up a little bit, and then go back to my scale tool and scale it in. Maybe bump it just a little bit. There we go. That is quite the pin, but you know, it's supposed to be a little cartoony, so it's fine. It is a little bit faceted looking, so I am going to go and select all the edges and smooth them. That looks good. Okay. Benefits of moving that pivot to that. Now we can easily move this over here and place it. And we're moving it by that point. So it's going to be easier to stick it in here. And then like rotate it so that it's like stuck into there. You see that? What if we want to have more pins? Like we want to, but we kind of want to keep like it kind of bent out like this. We want to keep it kind of similar. And we don't want to accidentally spend a lot of time making sure that it is actually in the tomato, you know, because we could just duplicate it and then we could move it over here and then we have to rotate it. And it's like, oh, like, is it actually in the tomato or not? One of the ways that we can add some more pins really quickly is by changing its pivot location. So first, let me freeze that transform and delete its history. Next, the pivot location does not always have to be on the object itself. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to snap its pivot by holding the V key with Edit Pivot on to, let me turn this on to help me. There we go. That center of the tomato. and turn this off. So now if I were to rotate this object, it's going to rotate it around the tomato. You see that? So this might be a little bit easier for me to place if I'm trying to place like a bunch of them in a hurry, because I know it's going to be inside that tomato. So I could easily then hit Control D, rotate it around, Control D, add maybe another one. If after I've placed them, I do want to kind of fix it, like, oh, I need to actually just shove it in, we could always just move it here. But don't forget that you can always, if you really mess up your pivot points, if you double click any of these tools, the transform tools, we get a little bit more pivot manipulation. We can go to edit pivot and reset it, and it'll put it in the center of your object, not at the base or anything, but the center of it. So we could refine this a little bit more. That way. Just rotate a little bit. There we go. And now we have our little cartoony, not that one. There we go. Pin cushion of our tomato. We would then texture it with those strings on it, and we would be able to see why it was kind of a pin cushion like that. But yeah, there we go. A little deco on top, some cute little pins, and our pin cushion. Hopefully you had fun and you will follow along with this video.